In today's video, we are going to be covering 3 reasons why the Los Angeles Chargers are going to have a massive 2025 season. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. And we are going to begin with my very first reason why the LA Chargers are in for a big year, and that is continuity. Now, in case you don't know what continuity means in the context of the NFL, continuity is essentially having a very similar roster from what you had last year and carrying it over into this upcoming season. And when you look at this LA Chargers team, they're practically running back basically the exact same roster, plus a couple new pieces here and there, with basically the exact same coaching staff. Now, sometimes continuity isn't necessarily the biggest deal breaker. Sometimes you can have continuity and still be a mediocre or an average team. But in the specific case with the LA Chargers, I actually think continuity is one of the biggest reasons why I actually think this team will be really good next year. When you have continuity, you build chemistry, you build a better connection with your coaching staff. And I thought last year the coaching staff did a fantastic job of building a culture, of building an identity, and really having this team heading in the right direction. But now that it's year 2, we can expect them to take an even bigger step forward because you now have a full offseason together. You already experienced each other last year, so you know some of the little quirks to your game. For example, if you're Justin Herbert and it's 3rd and 15, you're probably going to know, maybe not to an exact T, but you're going to know, what the coaching staff's going to call, which is going to give you extra time to think about what you're going to do. Same thing with the coaching staff. If the coaching staff understands the nuances of, a Justin Herbert, then they're going to play even more so to his strengths. This also follows suit for basically every single position group, not just the quarterback and the head coach, but your running back with their running backs coach and your running back with your offensive coordinator. Same with the receivers, offensive line, and everyone on the defense. Because there is more continuity, there is a better understanding of how this team should function and how this team is going to work, and I think it's going to pay massive dividends in the upcoming season. I think the biggest thing I am mostly excited for is this Harbaugh and Herbert connection. Last year, we saw the two almost have like a bit of a bromance in a way. It was actually really kind of fun and refreshing to see in LA. After so many years of just dysfunction with bad head coaches and just honestly not great play around Justin Herbert, finally we get a guy in Harbaugh who understands, how to get Herbert going, understands some things about him, and is putting together an offense that should really honestly be perfect around Justin Herbert. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention this because this is unfortunate news that just came out yesterday. Rashawn Slater is unfortunately out for the season, so that will kind of affect this offensive line in some ways. There's no longer a ton of depth in this unit as there once was. But the thing I will say, the replacements are within the team, so the continuity issue is still there. You're probably moving Pipkins out to tackle. In comes Bradley Bozeman. You have Zion Johnson also there, as well as Mekhi Becton. They'll figure out that interior somehow. And so that's essentially the same unit as you had last year, just without Rashawn Slater now at right tackle. So you still have a lot of veteran experience and chemistry along the offensive line, even with the injury. It is unfortunate though, because Rashawn Slater is truly one of those difference-making tackles. And when you had a tackle duo of Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, that was just nasty. Now it's just going to be Joe Alt on one side and then Trey Pipkins on the other. Regardless though, even when you go down to this defense, there is basically the exact same unit as last year heading into this upcoming season. They really did not go out there and add too much in free agency. You're still rocking essentially the same unit, minus a couple pieces, but also adding in a few guys here and there. But you're really going to be running the exact same defense as last year. So as I talked about with the offense, with all the continuity and chemistry up on the offensive line, within the receiving core and quarterback to head coach, you're going to have the exact same thing on the defense, where if you are one of the defensive linemen and you have a play call where you are going to be, stunting or blitzing in a certain way, you're going to understand the players around you and how they actually get the job done. Same thing with the secondary. They're going to understand the little quirks within the coverage, etc. There should be better chemistry, better continuity, and a better understanding of the system, which should all benefit this team moving into next year. Let us hop into my second reason as to why I think the LA Chargers will have a dominant year in 2025. And that is, I think there has been some nice developments around Justin Herbert. Now, again, the Rashawn Slater injury does kind of put a bit of a damper on things because he is truly a special tackle prospect, and that offensive line was looking pretty darn good on paper. Now you take out Rashawn Slater, it's still a good offensive line, but I guess there's more questions than what there was 3 days ago. But surrounding a guy in Justin Herbert is now 2 very, very good running backs in Najee Harris and Amarian Hampton. Hampton was my RB2 of the 2025 NFL draft, and Najee Harris is a proven running back who is not a super dynamic, playmaking running back, but he is somebody that can do the dirty work. He never gets injured. He's always available, although he did hurt his eye. We'll see about that. I think he should be okay for week 1. But Najee is just kind of that guy. Like, he can be a bit more of a bruiser style guy, and Hampton's also like that. But he also presents a bit more of like a home run threat that Najee hasn't really had since Bama, especially nowadays. He's definitely not the home run threat. However, I think both these guys are ideal fits in a Jim Harbaugh system. Jim Harbaugh really doesn't require, the big 55-yard runs. Of course, he'll love to have them every single play if he could, but it's just not realistic. He likes the guys that will get down, do the dirty work, push the pile, and, average 4 to 5 runs a carry and keep the offense on pace. That's what you're going to get from Najee, and that's definitely what you're going to get from Amari Hampton. The nice thing is you can allow Amari Hampton to sort of just take this rookie year and just learn as much as he can, because he's not going to be thrusted into a starting spot, unless Najee ends up missing time. So for Hampton, you can get 10, 15 carries a game, understand the nuance of the scheme and the system, build a connection with Herbert and all these other guys, and then heading into 2026 and 2027, you become the guy, and now you're the 3-down guy. The nice thing, too, is it also kind of extends the career of Amari Hampton. We all know running backs do not have a very long lifespan. So for Amarian, who's now going to get plenty of carries, but definitely not as much as if he was the full-time starter, he can now kind of take this year to learn, develop, get healthy, stay ready for next year, and then moving forward, you basically add on an extra year potentially to his career. So I love this running back room, but I also low-key like the receiving core too. Now, they just added Keenan Allen, I think sometime this week. And last time Keenan was in LA, he was actually a pretty productive player on this team. I want to say his last year here, I think he had over 1,000 yards. Don't quote me on that, but I think he did. You now pair Keenan Allen with Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston, as well as Trey Harris. Now, I don't necessarily think Keenan Allen is going to be the go-to guy for Herbert like he maybe once was. I think that's now probably Ladd McConkey's job. And I don't think he's really going to be the big-time playmaker, because I think that's also the job of a Trey Harris and sometimes a Quentin Johnston. So I'm interested to see kind of what his role is. Is he primarily going to play on the slot? Will he play on the outside? Where is his, spot on this team? What's the hierarchy of this receiving core? But the one thing I will say, you have 3 very young receivers, and I know they need some time to develop. So having a guy like Keenan Allen could really help out this unit, especially because they're so young. But specifically with this trio of the young receivers, I've talked about this in other videos. I actually really do like the fit of these guys next to each other. You have Ladd McConkey, who could be a bit more of your slot guy, your possession receiver, your guy that you can rely on to move the chains. Then you have your Quentin Johnston. This is your playmaker. This is your guy you're going to throw a screen to. You're going to give him handoffs in the backfield. You're going to test him deep occasionally. He's going to just kind of do a bit of everything, albeit still needs a little bit more time to develop. I don't think he's done and really developing, and I think he's probably 1 or 2 years away. Then there's Trey Harris. That is your deep ball. Hey, you go run 50 yards downfield almost every single play, because that is basically what he did at Ole Miss. Now, he can do other things too, and I think there's a lot to like about his game, but there's also a lot of development that does need to happen. For now, for this upcoming season, and maybe even heading into next year, barring him just breaking out on the scene, I think Trey Harris is primarily going to be utilized as a deep downfield threat that can space the field, make some big splashy 50-50 plays here and there, and honestly at times be a bit of a safety blanket for Herbert when it's 3rd and 15. You want to make a big chunk play, throw the ball up to Trey Harris, see if he can make a play. But now you add a Keenan Allen into the mix, who is that veteran in the room who can help develop a guy like QJ or Trey a little bit, as well as, honestly, I think his game could also be really nice for a guy like Ladd McConkey to learn a little bit from, because, Keenan has, he's not the fastest guy in the world. He's never been the biggest guy in the world or anything like that. He's bigger than, Ladd McConkey, but you kind of get my point. Ladd could probably take a tip here and there from the savvy veteran that Keenan's been for his entire career. In the tight end room, you do have Will Dissly potentially starting. You have Tyler Conklin, 2 guys that aren't necessarily, difference makers. You do have a Rondé Gadsden, which we'll see if he can get some playing time this year. And then going back to the offensive line, with the injury of Slater, I do not think this offensive line is probably a top 5 unit. I think prior to it, there was a strong argument that it could end up being a top 5 unit. But now that you have Rashawn Slater out for the year, it's a little bit harder to see this unit being that good. With that said, I'm not too overly worried about this line, because Joe Alt had a really good rookie year. He sticks in at tackle. Pipkins has the ability to play multiple positions. I'm not overly worried about him at potentially right tackle. Becton had a great year last year in Philadelphia. He seems to be the perfect fit within Harbaugh's system. Bozeman has a lot of experience. Zion Johnson has some experience too. You also have some bench guys too, like an Andre James who's played a lot and a few guys here and there. I wouldn't mind seeing this team maybe go out there and make a trade for like a swing tackle or a potential guard off of free agency. Like Brandon Sheriff is, or I think it's Brandon Sheriff. I never know how to say that guy's name, but I think he's still in free agency. So you might want to take a look at him. A little bit older, but he's also out there. Dalton Reisner's out there too. Not saying those guys will start, but it's never a bad idea to have a bench guy who can come in for a relatively cheap 1-year deal, sit on your bench, and, you know, if another injury does happen, because let's be honest, injuries happen, you have a guy off the bench who can come in. Again, if they feel comfortable with their backups, then that's not an issue, but if they are a little bit worried about it, maybe you decide to go out there and pick up one of those guys, because there's still a couple options out there in free agency. All in all, I think this offense around Justin Herbert is one of the better units he's had in quite some time. I think it's probably the most complete unit he's maybe ever had, because even when he did have, you know, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, there was other issues with that unit. I know you had Austin Eckler, but he was never a great running back. Now you kind of have a nice group of 2 really good running backs, 4 solid receivers that I'm really intrigued to see what they look like this year, a nice set of tight ends, and an offensive line I feel pretty good about. Not to mention, in my opinion, one of the best offensive minds in Harbaugh with his scheme, and the way that he runs his offense, I think is brilliant. But then that brings me to my third reason as to why the LA Chargers will have a dominant 2025 season, and that is, I think they have, for the most part, a pretty easy schedule. Now, I'm going to go through it week by week here in just a second, but I do want to throw the caveat. The final, like, 4 or 5 weeks for this team is pretty darn brutal. So when you look at the schedule, obviously the top here is the preseason. By the way, big win versus Detroit. That was a crazy fun game to watch. They have Kansas City in week 1. Definitely going to be a tough matchup. I'm really intrigued to see what LA looks like in that one. Then you have Vegas, you have Denver. I think all these AFC West games are going to be quite difficult, but I think LA will be able to pull out and be about 4-2, 3-3 within the division. You have New York, you have Washington, you have Miami, Indy, Minnesota, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. Then after the bye, Las Vegas. This stretch after the Denver Broncos is actually not that hard. There are some tough matchups here and there, like Washington. I think Indy could be competitive this year, Pittsburgh, Minnesota. But for the most part, the Chargers should be able to handle business. And by the time they're in week 13, they've played 12 games. I would expect them to be somewhere between 8-4 or 9-3, which then gets you to this really brutal stretch here. This is 5 games here, and I think the Chargers need to find a way to go 2-3 or 3-2 in this stretch. You have Philadelphia, that's a tough one. You have Kansas City, they've been competitive with Kansas City. I can see them winning that one. You have Dallas. I know Dallas has been pretty good against LA, but I think LA is the better team. They should potentially win that one. You have Houston, kind of the same thing, kind of 2 close teams that have been really connected lately. I think this is a game where LA needs to pull the win out. And then lastly, versus Denver, this one could end up being a really important game for either wild card seeding or maybe even for the division. So while this is nowhere near the easiest schedule I've ever seen, if you want to see one, go look at San Francisco's schedule. That is a cupcake schedule. This is not that, but I've also seen a lot of schedules that are significantly worse. Like the Lions have a brutal schedule. There's a lot of teams out there that have absolutely brutal schedules. This Chargers team does not have that. With that said, there are a ton of tests here. The entire AFC West is going to be very difficult. You have to go through the NFC East as well. So this is not going to be a breeze of a schedule. You have to get through some tough opponents. But in my opinion, I look at this schedule, and if we assume this is a really good competitive team with every team in the NFL, including the likes of Philadelphia, Kansas City, Denver, Dallas, etc., I'm looking at this Chargers team and I'm seeing, potentially anywhere from 11, 12 wins on the season. If they can get to 12 wins, they very well could end up winning the division, because I don't think Kansas City is going to be, what were they, like 15-2 last year? I just don't see that happening, but they might be better than 12-5. We'll have to wait and see. All in all, I do think this Chargers schedule is not the hardest schedule in the world, so I think there is a chance that this team does go 12-5, and if they get to 12-5, whether they win the division or not, you get your name in the hat in the playoffs, and once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. Now, I do want to say this, if they were to make the playoffs, they would not be my personal favorite to, come out of the AFC. Right now, I do think Buffalo's better. I think Kansas City has an argument, especially in the playoffs. You can never doubt Kansas City. And Baltimore, to me, is clearly the best team. But I think the fourth spot right there is really up for grabs. I think Houston's in the conversation. I think Denver's in the conversation. I do think the Chargers are in there as well. We'll see if Cincinnati or Pittsburgh can throw their names in the hat. They're both definitely there. Indianapolis Indianapolis also has the chance if, Richardson looks pretty good next year. I'm not really counting on that, though. So there's a lot of teams in the AFC that are fighting for that fourth spot as like the fourth best team in the AFC. And I do think the Chargers are probably right now, if they're not the fourth best team right now, they're probably the fifth or sixth or really close to being the fourth. So because of that, I do think this team can be quite competitive. And again, once you get into the playoffs, it's anybody's game. And at that stage, you have a chance to do some really special things. But you let me know in the comment section below how many games are the LA Chargers going to win in 2025. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.